Hey everyone, so you're probably wondering what was this activity behind Agile UI in the recent couple of months, and maybe you have tried it earlier at some point. Maybe you are a user who have used Agile Toolkit a few years back and you want to get back into Agile UI waiting until it's reached a certain stability. So I decided I will continue with the series of videos and I will record one video for each release. So recently, well, it's been a while actually, I have published this huge release of Agile UI called 140, and I haven't really talked much about that, so I decided to put together a video and go through the technical bits and talk about the changes behind the scenes. So if you have a existing application or you wonder what has changed internally, you can refer to this video and I'll try to talk and show you the code. Okay, so first a little bit of background. So I published this roadmap article in November just to explain where Agile UI is heading, what's going to be the new stuff. So there was a lot of requests for having some sort of actual passwords, and although initially I have created this field as a built-in into Agile UI, later on I have moved it into a separate repository, which is now under ATK 4/login. So it does come with a bunch of different classes, but you don't have to use them. If you only need the password field, it's over here. This is pretty easy code, and for the most part, this was a proof of concept that you can create custom fields and then use them inside your application. So going back to Agile Data, where I also had to update the way how you declare the fields. So I have the editor in here as well. So suppose you have a model and you want to add new fields, you would write add field password. So now what you can do is, as a second argument, you can specify an actual seed, and you would go something like my password field here, and this is how you can override the name of the class. Previously you would have to do model add and then specify the object here or the name of the class here, but now you can also do it through Agile field with the injection, so that's quite handy. It doesn't impact anything with backwards compatibility, because normally would have associative array in here, so let's say something like required true. So it's working perfectly, except that you can also inject the name of the class, and if you specify additional arguments, these will be channeled into the constructor of this field class. So we'll go, so if you define constructor for this class, you will be able to pass something into that. This is actually this has been changed in the core actually a few releases back, I believe. It wasn't widely used, but I think it was over here that we implemented seed merging, and it just explains how you could pass additional stuff into seeds. So yeah, okay, passwords. Next, migrations, and so I partially need migrations for my own project, and it actually does live in a different repository, ATK for schema. Let me open that. So I believe there is this dangling pull request which hasn't been approved for a while because it's kind of still incomplete, but what it allows us to do is interact with the model, because previously ATK schema has only a dependency on DSQL. Yes, so DSQL and core, and essentially it creates this sort of a language which is based on DSQL, and you can change some fields and then either create table or update table if you want. But with this pull request now, it is able to work with the models now. So it can export models, it can import models, and it also works with schemas. So I have looked around there for some abstraction, because in different databases you perform schema alteration differently, but I haven't found anything convincing. So I guess I'll still have to look around a little bit more. Maybe I'll find something. Okay, next stop is a wizard, which we have successfully implemented, and it's inside the core of ATK. So you can see it here, wizard, and there were a couple of tweaks for it, specifically to make it work with Facebook for WordPress integration. But the logic is quite simple. So wizard has a callback, or which it uses whenever you go back or forward one step. Yeah, so you can see the value of the callback is 2. So we completed 2 pages. So there's page number 0, number 1, number 2, and I can go back, and you see it decreases. If the callback is not used, it's the same as having the page number 0. And so there are a couple of interesting integrations. For example, if you do add the form inside a wizard, then the next button will change. So you see the link there, but when I'm clicking the next button, it's actually verifies that the form is submitted. Now it still can be circumvented, so I can actually type 2 in here, and I'm go to step number 2, and I can skip that and go to step number 3. So whenever you're relying on this functionality, you have to kind of verify for yourself, but it's quite convenient. So as long as on the last step you make sure that all the steps have been completed, and you will be fine. Again, for the wizard, there is a documentation. So if you want to know how it works, okay, fine. Where did the documentation go? All right. Yeah, so you have a bunch of properties you can read about code placement and how to declare steps. I think Wizard is a good demonstration of what kind of UI components would like to build, because it's very high level. You just add it on your page and it works. Console and progress bar. So in order to implement these, we had to refactor some of the stuff inside, and so it took several steps to get them working. Yeah, so you saw that. Well, when I arrived at the migration step, it was executing several commands over here. Yeah, so output sleep, and so on. So that's how it works, and an output is being delivered to the user immediately. And the other thing is that if you look at the finish button, it is disabled by default, but once we reach everything until the end, the button changed. That's how I'm doing it. So I'm disabling the button on the page load, And when the wizard finishes, it sends a JavaScript event which will re-enable the button. So that's how easily it can be done. All right, so behind that there is a bit of stuff. Okay, so if you go to the SSE demo, it has this progress bar, which is also have been converted into the progress bar widget, but initially it wasn't. And the way it works is very simple. So the progress bar is not an interactive element on itself, but I can put it in a variable and then I can pass it into a callback. So GSSSE callback. This is this real-time callback, and then I can update the value from inside by using a send command like this. Okay, so that's a demo of SSE, server send events and real-time consoles. Yeah, so the console works great. Next one is data manager, and the anticipation here was that the CRUD is great. Yeah, in here CRUD is quite powerful, but we need to have some sort of multi-entity management, and that's why we but that's why I built ATK for master CRUD. So in a way, that's a component which can operate multiple CRUDs, and it's really effective at the syntax. So let's say you have clients, invoices, and each invoice have lines, and there are payments for invoices as well. So all you have to do is write a line like this, and this stuff will actually work well. Okay, it comes with a demo. So simple demo again with the invoices in here, lines, and it can actually specify whether you can perform a certain operation on these lines. So you can actually inject. Yeah? So in here you see I'm injecting the CRUD. It could actually be a table, so I can change this to table. Let me see if I have this demo configured. Right. Okay, so yeah, I have it client number 1. You see it looks a little bit different. And supposedly when I click here, I should be able to edit the client. But if I go here, there shouldn't be the editing, but just a read-only UI. So that read-only part is, there is no good widget for that yet, but as soon as we have, I'll implement something. And I can select the invoice and go inside the invoice. You see the breadcrumb is being properly updated. I can go inside the line. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just a bug. Not in the master CRUD, but in the demo. And I can also go back to any point in here. So the key argument here is this path value. Okay, let me see if I could do payment. Okay, so you see the path in here looks like payment / allocations, and that's the variable which master CRUD will decode first. And then additionally, it will look at the values such as payment ID, client ID, allocation ID. It comes up with all these values on its own based on the name of the table of the model. And it will load them, drawing all this bar and also applying necessary conditions. So this is a sort of deep traversal thing. Okay, so it works well. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can start using the master CRUD now. Give it a try. It's haven't been used by anyone yet, but it has what you need, looks like. Okay, login add-on. So I already mentioned it a little bit, but I can now go a little bit deeper, explaining to you what's inside this add-on, but also how the add-on is structured. All right, so add-on lives in a namespace. First of all, if you look inside the composer file, which you should probably include with your add-on, then we're saying, okay, we're going to have a namespace ATK login, which will be sitting inside the SRC. So no magic here. It's just a regular composer file. And once it's loaded, once it's the user specify that ATK4/login is required, then he can use some of these classes here, such as login form, right? So if he wants login form and it extends ATK UI form and augments that by changing the name of the button, adding maybe additional fields, and having a custom handler in here. So that's one way you can create custom classes. As you saw, we can also create a custom fields. We can create custom layout. Now, about the layout, there were some questions, so I'll go a little bit deeper in here. So the layout extends the generic layout of ATK UI, but it can specify a different template. So the property default template specifies a file from which the template is loaded. In this case, I'm using dir because I want to specify a file relatively to this current file. So we go up 2 folders, and then we go in the template, layout, and narrow HTML. So it's going to go here, template, oops, no, layout, and narrow HTML. So that it reads this file and it uses this as a layout. Okay, so I myself, I have a script which compiles the pug file into HTML automatically, and I'm writing pug file. But if you're building an add-on, you can create HTML right away. Okay, so apart from that, let me go. All right, so login also contains a model. And the general premise is that you can either use this model, or you can use your own model for the user, or you can extend this model into your own model. So there are various ways to do that. But when you're using the main class, which is login, you can inject the user model. So when you're calling the set model, it doesn't require its own specific user model. It can handle any model, to be honest. And as it was in the past, you can specify the field for the login and the password field. So it is quite flexible. You can out of the box, probably it's easier to just use a supplied model, but you don't have to. Okay, and yeah, the layout is not actually used yet. It is used inside the demos. Yeah, so there are quite a few demos you can explore. So if you just clone that, install dependencies, and open up the demos folder, you'll see how it works. Right, so that's kind of the index page. You can log in using some username and password. I probably need to update it. Okay, and when there is also a registration screen, so you can fill this out, you will get a new user. You can also look at how I have made these boxes. So you see the layout is new. It's different. And it's that bundled narrow layout. So if you want, you can. It's quite handy for the login screen, so you can use that. Okay, yeah. So we define this in the app, in this file, rather the DB file. So that's our app, and here is the way how we initialize the layout. Let's see if I can log in now. Okay, yeah, so after update it all works fine, and that's my profile. Okay, I can also change the password. And I can log out. So if I log out and I arrive to the dashboard, then it says the user is not currently logged in. And finally you have admin. Okay, so that's just for using showing list of users. I'm not sure why it doesn't work. All right, back to the next. What else? Yeah, so that was my article back in November. It's just a couple of things I was planning to do, and then I was working hard with my contributors to actually release this version 1.4.0. When it went out, I also published this article on Medium, explaining what has been done. Okay, it shows us a new wizard, how the wizard works, how we using the console. I'll go into console a little bit more in one of the further videos. Also talks about GSSSE, progress bars, implementation of reloads actually has changed. I should probably go just explain a little bit more about that. So what has changed in reloads? Let me see if there was a okay, so there was a pull request to change the way how reload is working, because previously to use reload you would have to create a new method, and you had to create a new object from the class GSReload. But now there is this new way. Instead of doing that, you can now simply call GSReload on any view. It's a method of view. What it will do, it will create a GSReload for you, and this is now a preferred way. It's also backwards compatible. It's kind of easier because no need to worry about namespaces. But the reason why this is now possible is because we have implemented the URL on the view level as well. Okay, so let's look inside what was inside. Originally we had URL method defined in the application class, and it was relying on sticky gets. So okay, sticky gets. So and the way how sticky works is that you can set a sticky argument and it affects all the URLs below that. See, so it gets appended to all the URLs automatically. Unfortunately, sometimes you need to set a sticky variable on the level of the view and not on a global level. And this is the pull request which did that. So this was a ticket explaining that we need to be able to create URLs of a message right over here. So for example, if the message is located on the virtual page and it uses a callback, then it should incorporate that callback inside the callback get argument inside its own callbacks. And I have a very good demo for that. So if we're going on the wizard, as I go through in here, this is first example. So on a select a model, there are two links, and if I look at the source, here is select a model, here is a table. It's a grid, right? And I'm adding a decorator which will pass a link, and then additional argument will be name. Now previously you also had to include an argument for the current step, otherwise a step resets and you end up with not being able to select a name like this. But with the recent change to the URLs, you are now able to it just works correctly, simply because the table is placed on the virtual page, and the virtual page is assigned to have this sticky get in itself. So that was a big change. We wanted to implement that a long time ago, and it allowed us to do GS reload in a much more reliable way. Because if you have used GS reload prior to version 1.4, you always had to worry that calling GS reload from the callback would accidentally supply more get arguments than it should, but now it's no issue at all. Okay, yes, that all right. So that the reloading has changed. Now it's much easier to do. And that's what you do. Just right column GS reload. You're not worrying about the callback settings here. Just reload it. Next one we have is a upload field. Let me just double check if we have it over here. Yeah, we have. So the upload field allows me to, pick an image and then upload it to ATK, and that's a very basic implementation of the upload fields, which was included in version 1.40. But subsequently, we've built an implementation of a file store. So if you go to IDK4 file store, you'll see actually how this field is extended and integrated with the fly system. So the fly system is a PHP add-on for storing files, and it can store either on the disk or someplace else. And yeah, the code is amazing. So you have to create a fly system object, and you have to specify it as a parameter inside the file like that. Again, you can also use the injection if you want to. And that's it. It will work and it will store files. So one note is that you associate fly system with the file store inside the file. Yes. So if we look at the sources and the field, so that's a new field. And remember I told you that you can actually use constructor to pass the files in. That's how fly system is being passed, and then it's saved under here, fly system. So it gets stored in the property, and then whenever the file is being uploaded, we can manipulate this fly system. It needs to be removed. So we need to do a little bit of cleanup in here. Yes, but so whenever it's uploaded, it will actually store inside this fly system. This works quite well together with a model file, and most of the logic I think right now is not there, but it's inside the form field. So form field uses the upload field from ATK4, ATK 1.4, and it extends it, overriding the uploaded and deleted handlers. And so for now, this is logic which is sitting in here. To be honest, I think that it should be moved inside the model. And yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, so it does kind of link into the field here and the fly system, simply because we do have access to a field. Maybe from model we don't. Anyway, so this needs to be cleaned up a little bit, but it works. So it will be internal cleanup, which means you can probably use that also, and it will not change so much. Right, the next step is our ability to specify static data. And in the past, it was quite difficult to create table using an array. Now you can do table, you can do grid, you can do pretty much anything else. And the way how you specify this, the static data is flexible. So you can do that. It will automatically have the names and the surnames recognized. So it looks at the first, actually looks at the first column, the first row in here, and it deciphers it. So it picks up the keys and it uses them to initiate the fields. Also, you can probably use so you can also use it. You can also add your own fields into it. So it is quite flexible. And this, as you saw, the static persistence was done on the level of agile data, which means in several places we can now use the static persistence. Another example is the implementation of values. Okay, I'm not sure where the value implementation is, but there was a pull request. Let me try and find it. Okay, so okay, yeah, I think that's this one. Again, there was a lot of demand for having the values at this level, and it was implemented. So now you can add a field, and instead of using enum, you can specify property values, which not only will provide list of allowed, list of allowed properties, but will also use these in the UI. So that works for form right now. It might not work for the table. But the way how it handles this array in here is it simply creates a static persistence out of this, and with a static model, and then it will be related to that. So I think it was quite well done. Yeah, persistent static and tests. Okay. So what else is new? Radio buttons. Okay, so yes, with this we can now do radio buttons. Autocomplete have been added as well. Okay, what's autocomplete are here. They're autocomplete field. So it's actually the implementation of autocomplete is quite cool, because this is how you can do how you can use it, and it does look very similar to drop downs, but you can is it drop down here? Yeah, so that's actually a drop down. You see, it opens up immediately, and as I type, it looks up things. But if I search for Islands, then it won't find it, because it only matches from the beginning, and that's how semantic UI dropdown works. This over here is actual autocomplete. So if I click, you see there is a slight delay, and as I type, it will search a little bit longer because it queries the server every time. But now you see it can search much better, so it finds all the islands in here. And additionally, it has this really nice feature where it adds a new button. It's called the plus button. So if you click that, it will automatically open a pop-up and will load the form for adding a record into a related entity. And let's see if we can add a new one, and it will set it here. Yeah? So as you add a new record, it will automatically set it here. So it's very handy. If you're doing data entry, this is very invaluable. And then finally, it can also look for, as suggested by, additional fields. So Latvia has a code of LV, right? So I can look for more than just the initial, the first field. And it could be pretty complicated search pattern in there. Okay. So that's adding login. Yeah, I looked through that. WordPress integration through ATK, so that's entirely separate thing. Probably will not cover it here. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Lastly, I wanted to go through all the minor comments in here and see maybe anything else is worth mentioning. So yeah, they form like that because I'm using a new generator for changelog files, which will go through all the tickets, notice which issues have been closed, which pull requests have been merged. And it adds all these links in here, so I don't have to do it manually anymore. Okay, so model show arguments. Okay, so what this does here is if you're adding a model window on your page, so you click on something and the model window appears, you can instruct the model to use a callback. Yeah, so in here I'm using a callback. The P becomes the virtual page, and on the virtual page I'm adding a button. Now the change here is that when I'm triggering the display of this model, I can also pass the argument in here, such as color green, and the green gets passed inside that as a get argument. So quite handy for loading, for passing IDs or something similar, and you will see that in the demos as well. Next one is implement session memorize. So I thought it was implemented previously. Well, let's see. So that's actually implementation in ATK core. I think it was implemented before. You just add this statement to your class definition, and you now have methods for memorization and recalling. So this will not start session automatically for you, because first of all you can't do it with traits, but yeah, but you'll have a couple of methods in there. For storing okay, that's it. Oh, that's bollocks. No, it won't be removed. Okay, so you have memorize, learn, recall. So you get this 4, and you can use them to store something in the session. Quite handy. Okay, what else? Feature implement wizard. Yeah, I showed the wizard. Adding child to re-rendered. Yeah, so that was a bug. when we're doing a rendering, so if you render something and then add a child into that view and then render it again, because it was already rendered once, we're not going to call render multiple times, and that will display the same view without lorem ipsum. And it's probably good thing to know and understand, because if you do create intermediate render inside your view, and if you add children after that and then try to render again, you won't get an expected result. Disabling this cache would have some additional effects, because some of the views, when rendered, they add stuff to the template, and if you render them twice, you end up with something like having multiple paginators on your table. So that's not good. So we are preventing that. All right. Yeah, so link, yeah, it's not unnecessary because it's defined on the view level. So any view in ATK can have a link. So if you call link, it will convert it into the hyperlink tag, and we'll set href property to that. I think, yeah, so that's closed. It's not solved. We just can't move the windows. That's a limitation of semantic UI. Form error loads pop-up. So that's quite handy. So whenever you say have an error in the form, it will display it in the pop-up. Quite handy. Instead of throwing JavaScript errors in the console and then no one knows what is happening. Okay, implemented upload field. This was done and it was shown in demos. That's also done. Complete ignores model. Okay, so the few epics, implemented console, progress bar, wizard, a few more. Okay, managed problems, GS reload. We should actually go through the pull requests. Okay, so what else is here? Upload field. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's actually is probably worth mentioning. So in API we now have two methods called redirect and GS redirect. So you probably can guess what they do, but so when you call redirect, it just does issue a header and sends users to a different page. And for the GS redirect, here's documentation. You can respond with that, so it returns JavaScript, and you can return it from inside a callback. Okay, so these things are useful. This has been actually fixed several times over and over. This might be important for some. So it does implement a new model inside a new option inside the model, which is called observe changes. So if you call that, then it will automatically track the changes within the model, and if it does resize, So it could be a console which has more and more output, then it would resize it automatically. So there's some examples in here, such as outputting a lot of information within a console. Yeah, here. And because console is in the model, the model is initially small, but as the console expands, it adds a scroll bar. Right, so you see it goes down, so the console cannot manage that. But if you add observe change, then it all works just fine. Okay, I believe, oh yeah, so this is actually worth mentioning, but the lister got quite nice implementation. So it was one of the first components that was added into Agile UI, simply because it was needed by a table and everything else. But now it's actually quite nice, and it can be used on its own. So with the new set source, you can simply set up the arguments like that, and by default it doesn't come with any template. So if you just add lister without anything, it will error because it has no template defined, and that's why you would normally add it inside an existing template like this. Yeah? So you have a view with a template, and inside there you have a tag called list. And you're adding lister, specifying the tag list. So it will be inserted here, but also takes the contents of this stuff over here, and it repeats it as many times as necessary. And you see I'm using the country over here, and the flag goes in here, and that's what it's produced. So it really is handy. But on top of that, I have included lister.html, which you can use. It's a built-in template. It's not set by default, but it's there, and it will output stuff like that, right? So it's quite good at listing items one by one. It will show an icon on the left. It will show a link, and it shows a description. And if you look inside the HTML file, let's see what's okay. So if you look inside the HTML file, it is quite, so it's using, I think it uses the UI list, which is a standard semantic UI markup for lists. And here we have a list. There's item. I'm not sure why it's twice, but whatever. Yeah, and it has an icon which goes on the left, content with a header and description. So that's nice. Upload field. Okay, so that probably concludes everything we had in 1.4.0. So it was quite a lot of work, and yeah, let's, stay tuned, and I'll record the next video about release 1.4.1, which is actually there. Okay, thank you. Bye.